the goal was to make us so poor that we're unable to fight back. Howdy, folks. Welcome to the Daily Coin. My name is Rory, and today is Tuesday, December the 18th, 2018. And I have the very distinct honor and great pleasure of welcoming back to the show. It's been way too long since we've had him on. You are very familiar with his work as he does an evening every night, Monday through Friday, live broadcast on YouTube, and he uploads it to BitChute and Reel.video as well. And I'm talking about Louis Cammarosano from Small Gold, and you can find all of Louis's great work over at SmallGold, SMAULGLD.com. And we're very grateful to have Louis back on the show. What I want to start with, Louis, is gold and silver eagle sales. Mm-hmm. And year over year, they're down again, and it seems they cannot find any quality, consistent footing. Is this a function of debt saturation, lack of interest, or is there something else like cryptos influencing the change we have seen over the past 2 to 3 years?
I think it's a combination of a lot of things, some that you mentioned. So let's dispense with the cryptos. That was a valid concept that you and I discussed, and we thought that the cryptos were taking away from the sales. And clearly, you would say, towards the end of last year, when cryptocurrencies were going nuts, obviously all the attention was on fear of missing out. People didn't know what they were doing. They just say, "Oh, this is a good one. This is a good one. I'm going to get a Coinbase account and I'm going to buy cryptos."
Right.
But that was short-lived. And I think this year there was no real enthusiasm to buy cryptos. There was no real impetus to buy them. They were on a downswing all year. And silver sales fell even more this year than last year, even though cryptos were probably not taking the money away from silver and gold sales at the U.S. Mint. Now, you could argue, but I don't think it's true, that everyone went into cryptos and everyone lost their shirt, so everyone doesn't have any money to buy gold or silver. I'm not sure everyone bought cryptos with the enthusiasm and threw all their life savings into them. But one of the things you and I have talked about is there is a point, though, despite the idea that there's a recovery and a long-term expansion and low unemployment, there is a point where people that have been buying gold and silver maybe don't have the money to buy physical gold and silver.
Or they've reached it, or could it be that they've reached, or that they've reached a point to where they say, well, I'm comfortable with my holdings.
Yes, but the problem with that analysis is that means that no one new is coming into the market. So that would explain the long-term buyers that have been buying since 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, while they may have decided their portfolios are too skewed in silver and gold or in just silver, and that they want to diversify, or they just don't have any money left to buy anything else. Because you see, when you lose 60% on your silver, it doesn't give you much opportunity to go elsewhere. But what it does highlight is that you don't have new money coming into the retail coin space. And I think part of that is generational too. We do have some silver people like Matt from Silver Fortune is a young guy. Elijah is a young guy. They're interested in precious metals, but they're somewhat outliers compared to the millennial generation, which is much more digital. They don't buy CDs or vinyl LPs. They get their music, their videos. They're digital. They have limited experience with cash, limited experience with coinage. Certainly, they haven't handled, other than if they've got them as gifts or purchased them, constitutional silver. They certainly have never traded in gold coinage. So that's part of it. But the other thing is also...
I need to interrupt there right there because... You there? Hello?
Yeah, something happened.
I'm
there.
Yeah, I want to interrupt you right there, Louis, because you and I are outliers as well. And we are, I don't know exactly how old you are, but I know that I think that you're close to my age. I'm 56, so I'm on the tail end of the baby boomers, and I still have limited interaction with cash today. I have limited,
Right.
have, almost everything that I know about gold and silver. I had to go out and learn myself.
You do have
Period.
you do have a historical knowledge of when you used to use cash.
Yes.
So you supplemented your experience. But remember, if you've grown up without ever using it, then your idea, this is where I take issue with people saying we're going to return to gold and silver. That was clearly what was on the table in 1981, 82, after Nixon took us off the gold standard with the Ron Paul Commission, thinking about the gold standard. There were people, when the inflation hit in the late 70s, are like, look, this is bad. They went and they lined up at coin shops to buy gold and silver. But the last financial crisis, it was 10 years ago, we saw big interest in gold and silver. And as that financial crisis fades and younger people grow up with that, they saw the solution not as gold and silver. In fact, historically, when you look back at it right now, if there was another financial crisis in 2012 or 13, then gold and silver would have been vindicated in the general population's mind. But now what's happened is, and this is not unintentional, when they did QE3, that they bashed down the gold and silver prices.
Right.
If we have another financial crisis, people are going to say, well, what good did gold and silver do you in the last one? Forgetting there was that run up for a couple of years. So I think it's a function of it really, it's not just generational, is we are moving into a digital age, for better or for worse. And I don't think enough people see the value in the physical, and I don't think they will see it until it's difficult to actually access your bank, access your phone. You get hacked, things like that. People have they see, younger people take it for granted. Well, I'll just load up my phone, or I'll just turn on the light. They haven't gone through a period where they're not able to just do something. And as you know, people go for convenience, especially if that's all you've ever known.
Especially if that's all you've ever known. And like you said, once the digital world has a major disruption, then the physical world will come back into play. Right now, the physical world is of little consequence to any of the people that live in a digital world. That,
Correct.
like what you were describing, as far as being born into it, they don't know what that means. They don't know what it means to, well, you don't have anything at all. If your phone is down, your internet's down, your electricity is disrupted for, say, 3 or 4 months, what do you have? How do you function? Well, you don't. You don't, unless
And
you
you have
have
to
an
learn.
alternative. Right. I mean, but don't
And
you think that, or do you think that the black market, the barter world, would, not something like Barter Town from Thunderdome, but something like Barter Town from Thunderdome would start springing up all over? I think that
well,
it would, or something
it
like what in Fear the Walking Dead, in that series, they had a market. It looks like a flea market, and the way that it functions was exactly, there were credits that you would change at the door to go in. So
mhm.
I would take my rifles and I would change them for, whatever credits that they were worth, and then I would have that currency to use inside. Do you think that there would be something like that, or how would you see it playing out?
Okay, so it would depend on the severity and the duration of any type of loss of ability to be in a convenient digital world. Because the first thing that people would do when you lose your internet connection, what do? You yell and scream and you call Comcast, right? So that's what the world would do, is they would want that return. They wouldn't say, "Oh, this is good. I'm all prepared. I got my preps. I got my friends. I got my family. I got my ammunition. I got food, water. I got my gold and silver. Let the world go on, and this is much better." That's not what's going to happen.
No.
That would be an advantage to people who are prepared. But the rest of the world is not going to say, "Why don't I go into preparation mode and do what I should have done before?" The only way they'll go there is if you get an announcement, it ain't coming back for a year. It's not coming back for for 3 years, or it's obvious it's never coming back. Now, that's a very outside scenario, and that
Right.
is something you want to be insured against. But most likely, what will happen is you'll see issues where things are down, and terrorist attack or EMP, limited types of things. And if those things happen, that will put the thought into people's head that, this system is not as secure, just like they found out about the financial system. But I actually think that the value of the gold and the silver isn't for that. I think that's insurance, but it's not the day-to-day value. I think the value in gold and silver is purely, it's a limited quantity of precious metal that can be used in transactions as money, even though I call it dormant money today, but also has value for industry and also has tremendous value for jewelry. And indeed, I think an economy that actually somehow manages to get out of its funk and creates more people that have more disposable income, you may enter into, hopefully, if we get past all this debt and everything, that you have a golden era. And golden eras are not eras of depression and Mad Max. They're eras when people have money and they spend and they buy gold jewelry, they buy silver jewelry, and maybe they buy a silverware set. They adorn themselves with the wealth. That's what I hope for more for gold and silver than some type of, because if you have an insurance policy, which is what I think gold and silver also are, just like you have in your house, you don't hope your house burns down,
Right.
and you don't hope you have to cash it in. And you and I talked about this about 3 years ago. I think there's Salivate Metal does a very good job of this, but most of the silver and gold channels don't. Talks about the beauty of the coins, the designs, and then he pulls out historical examples of how gold and silver were used by craftsmen. I think that's the real interest in gold and silver, because no, there really shouldn't be a channel where you go online and talk about, well, my prudential policy says this. What does your policy say over at Aflac? It's not interesting to me to talk about gold and silver as insurance. That to me is just a fact of life. You need insurance. But there's a lot more to gold and silver than just insurance. And there's not, unfortunately, the insurance becomes the game changer, silver set to skyrocket. I mean, you point out if gold is a store of value, it's not supposed to skyrocket. It's supposed to hold its value. And
Right.
when you promote gold is set to skyrocket and gold 50,000, all you're saying is its monetary value is going to hold its value if we have a tremendous collapse or a great inflation. But that's not going to make you rich. In fact, all it's going to do is hold your current monetary value. But in that type of situation, there'll be less to buy because people won't be able to make stuff unless they have this current infrastructure.
Yeah, and also those moonshots or, gold 50,000, those are also, to me, that is someone that's touting gold and silver as an investment. To me,
Correct.
they're not an investment vehicle, and I'm not going to get rich on it. I'm just going to be able to live because I have an insurance policy.
And savings, not just
Right.
insurance. It's savings that you can cash in. And if you
Yes.
look at the price, Roy, over the last 15 years, with the ups and downs, if you bought gold even since 2011, every year at the mid price of the year, 1 ounce, it would still be slightly ahead of the dollar. That's it may go up and down. That's very stable. And you don't have to worry that the money that you had in the bank would go out of business or whatever. So that's where gold actually is not just insurance, not just latent or dormant money, but actual savings and storage of wealth. I mean, there's no denying that. But to say it's going to go to 50,000, you're just trying to sell bullion or newsletters
Or something. You're selling something, and I'm not buying. But
yeah. Well, not on that basis.
right.
When I mentioned this, I used to get people on my channel, they don't visit anymore, is that I'm trashing gold and silver. I said, absolutely not. I'm trashing the stories around it that people have become addicted to, and they're scratching their head and saying, well, how come silver's been down for 7 years? It's like, because you're not hearing the full story about silver, and it's not just manipulation. Silver is not gold, never has been, never will be. But they've been convinced that silver has this mythical, and when you hear silver is rarer than gold, it's like, where'd you come up with that one? That's not true. But people want to believe that because they've invested in silver. And that's the problem. I just said what you said. They invested in silver. That's the wrong way of looking at it.
Exactly. And I do invest in silver, uh, in the beauty of the silver coins. I love the ATBs. I've written
Right.
extensively about the artistic quality that is the America the Beautiful coins, and the Black Rhino coin that I can't remember who produced it, but that is, uh, I'm very grateful that I have one of those coins in my collection. There was one, I have one of 2,500 that were minted. I've
Wow.
written extensively about it. I personally think that it is one of the most beautiful coins ever produced. I mean, the artistic value that it brings to the table is really incredible, and I really have a deep appreciation for the small fractional gold pieces, the 1/10th and 1/20th ounce gold coins, because specifically for the artistic value that they have. Because when you're talking about a piece of metal that's that small, and the
Right.
detail that they can bring into a surface that is so limited, and they can and just create these anything that has a particular beauty to it. And that to me is worthy of appreciation, and so I do appreciate them, and I really have. I love the Perth Mint and what they, the Kooks. I get the Kooks every year, and the I just got the 2019 Year of the Pig, and those are pretty cool. They're not as nice as some of the other years, like the Rooster in particular. Really like the Rooster, and I really like the dog. Pig is okay as far as its artistic value, but anyway. So
Well,
I like Sal have a great appreciation for the art that is the coins.
in most of the silver channels, well, Chris Drain has done a good job because what he
He's
does
done a
is
great job.
he puts out a series of coins, and they're reasonably priced, and then they're limited minted, so you get this kind of, maybe they go up, which is good. But for most silver channels, they're talking about ounces.
Right,
I mean, you might as well be talking about zinc, aluminum, copper, because you can make argument for any commodity if you want
right.
to tout it that way. Silver stacking. I think that does a disservice because it does commoditize it, does make it sound like you're buying it simply because you think rhodium's going to go up. Look, palladium did go up. I mean, so it's not the same thing. Silver and gold are much more historic. No one buys palladium objects, the art. No one buys palladium rings. It's just not, but it's gone up. Now that's fine, but that's an
It's great.
investment in palladium as a
Right.
commodity. But
It's investment.
there's too much, I think, of that in the silver and gold. Is some type of investment and stack, and it's a sales pitch as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that a lot of the young, newer, younger YouTube channels, they just, they're excited, and I get it. I just don't think that they have the long-term view, and they don't have the experience and the knowledge to bring to the table. So they talk about what they know, stacking. Okay, so which is great. I mean, we need that to encourage other people to get in the market. I mean, and I didn't get into gold and silver to be a coin collector. I didn't.
Ah,
Period.
so
I
so
was
that so that
not.
was an entree point. Well, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, it was. But over the years, and it was really, like I said, it was that Black Rhino coin that came out. It was about 4 years ago, 5 years ago that I picked it up, and
I'm looking at it now. I'd never even heard of it. I just
yeah,
pulled
it's
it up.
it's an unbelievable coin. I mean, it is so beautiful, the artwork and the detail. And
Mm.
and I love what Chris Dwayne's doing as far as the art. I mean, there's hands down, he's got the corner on the art coins. Period. In my opinion. I mean, Perth
Well,
Mint.
because Perthman, you deal with the queen on the other side, so by default you're going to lose because there's nothing special about just having a queen on the other side.
Right.
You don't have two-sided coins.
Right. Um, Lewis, I want to change gears, if you don't mind, and take a look at what's going on with big tech and the demonetization and the outright attacks on our First Amendment. The goal was to make us so poor that we're unable to fight back. And if you
Well, that
think
makes sense.
about
Sure.
exactly, and the demonetization, the collapse of the big tech attacking a variety of conservative voices, and stripping the conservative voices of any opportunity to generate a real income online anymore. It's the truth. I mean,
Well,
that is a fact.
well, it's the same thing with eliminating certain words
Right.
because they're basically crippling you verbally.
Yes.
And if you say a certain thing by mistake or even intentionally, well, then that leads to the whole parade of horribles with getting demonetized, deplatformed, and so on.
Well, and not only that, but it could be that you're a comedian and your entire career is
Right.
ruined, or and not only is your entire career ruined, but they strip you of any potential future wealth from your past, and it's
Correct.
like they did
Or,
Roseanne Barr. I mean,
or they
it's
can go,
incredible.
into your past, as they did with Sargon of Akkad, and said, "Oh, look what he said 10 months ago off the platform. I guess we can't support. We can't allow him to get paid anymore through our platform."
Right. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just it's incredible. So kudos to Pastor Lindsey Williams for getting it right at least once.
Yeah, his initials. I'm not going to say who he is, but his initials are Rory Hall.
Oh, it's like I said, he got it right, and I'm grateful that I actually heard that, and it's like I said, it stuck with me all these years. And you had you did an interesting video yesterday or the day before. I was listening to it yesterday, but you were it was along these same lines, and it was about the headlines and how headlines drive the view counts, and that has long been a point of contention for me, that I don't really like, going after these, blood curdling, showstopper, must watch, must read. You have to stop what you're doing because the sky is falling, Chicken Little
Right.
headlines. However, they are effective, and that's what you showed, right?
Well, they are effective even for people who claim that they're not influenced by that. No one likes to think that that they're gullible, that they like sensationalized things. They like to think they're rational or logical. But you do an A/B testing and you say something like Indian gold imports increased 22%. No one's going to click on it. You put Indian gold imports explode. What do Indians know that we don't know? Like they don't know anything. They bought a bunch of silver, but that one's going to get 10 times more clicks.
At least 10
And
times.
and so what I've decided to do is to put come for the headline, stay for the analysis. I'm not changing. So if I'm going to report on Indian silver, I'm not going to put what they imported in the headline.
Right.
I'm going to create some interest in the story, and I'm going to analyze what's in the story. It's the same thing with central banks are buying gold hand over fist. No, they're not. But if you write that and then you just accurately say that Poland bought 6 tons of gold, if everyone wants to go nuts over that, let them have at it. But I try to explain how much 6 tons of gold is compared to the total amount of gold produced in a given year. And so I think you have to play a middle ground, because if no one reads your stuff, no matter how good it is or how factual it is, what good is it?
Right.
So you have to get them there somewhere. But the worst is when people make up things like gold back you on, game changer, game over. And there was, as you and I were the only ones, along with Coos Jansen, who looked into that story and found there was never any source to that story whatsoever. It was just made up. And once the original made up story, it's almost like what the FBI and CIA do. They plant the story in the media,
Right.
and then they use that as the source for the story.
Exactly.
So
Crazy.
we look at that and we say, whoa, what gold back yuan? Well, China just announced, look at the Nikkei Asian Review, and you read the Nikkei Asian Review, and it says sources say, and then you say, where are the sources? Well, at least 4 guys, they're gold experts. They must know about it. And that story got repeated ad nauseum. And then if you try to deny that story with facts, you're a shill, you're a disinformation agent, all that kind of stuff.
And that narrative still has a few legs today.
Oh, absolutely.
Not quite the impact that it did a year and a half ago, or whenever it was, a year ago.
It's still around. Just
still around.
Hey, Rory, I'll give you an example. Russian collusion.
Yes.
That is the same thing. They planted that story.
Right.
They are trying to dismantle that story by saying, okay, and the thing is, every time a person gets indicted in relation to the Russian probe, even though it has nothing to do with Russia, that puts a seed in people's mind that there is a Russian collusion story.
When nothing could be further from the truth.
Right. So if the price of gold, well, whatever happens in China, they try to find some way to say, well, it's because China's preparing for a gold-backed yuan. The fact that China doesn't report gold holdings to the People's Bank of China, to some people, is evidence that it's some type of Sun Tzu deception, that they actually are planning a gold-backed yuan.
It's always Sun Tzu.
Oh, Sun Tzu, game changer.
47D chess.
yeah, that's just the other 7, right? 4D, 53D chess. They're not telling you what they're doing. And you know what's funny about it, Rory? The same people that'll tell you Sun Tzu, act weak when you are strong, and they're really accumulating gold. And they'll admire China for their classic deception. But at the same time, they're going to tell you that the gold, that the yuan is going to be an international currency, which the main point in a currency, as we've discussed and everybody knows, is confidence. If you think that China's out there deceiving the world about their gold holdings, why would you trust the yuan? So they try to say that the yuan is going to be the world reserve currency. Everybody loves the yuan, but yet they have more gold than they say they have because of Sun Tzu deception. You can't have both of them, but yet they want to have both of them just because that's the narrative. So I think, Rory, everything, this is what I've concluded, whether it's mainstream media, alternative media, or even small gold, it's all about the narrative. It's what people want to hear, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to hear something, but I have a problem with when you give people what they want to hear and it's half factual, cherry pick fact, they're not factual at all, then I have a problem. So I've come to grips with a little more spicy headlines, and as long as I provide the story and the analysis, and I did that last night. I put out, is J.P. Morgan going down in flames? Well, that's a question. I didn't say that they were, and I analyzed for 40 minutes the recent court cases that J.P. Morgan faces, the criminal probe and the class action suits against them on the civil side. And I talked about them, but I didn't get on there and say JP Morgan's going down, strap yourselves in, this is a game changer, silver's going to go to $600 an ounce, and JP Morgan's going to declare bankruptcy and Jamie Dimon's going to go to jail. That's what people think when they see the headline now. But as long as I don't say that in the article or the YouTube, and I explain what happens, I'm perfectly fine with a headline that's a little spicy.
Yeah, sexier headlines are good. I mean, that's and one of the things that I've wrestled with over the years is trying to develop a sexier headline, but remaining factual at the same time, and that's a tall order. And
well, you've done a good job with it, but I know that sometimes because you're a curator, you get in something from someone and it's okay story and you think it's valuable, but it says must read, game over, and then you're like, it's not really, but right. I want to post it. And sometimes I see what you do is you actually write a little editor note and you say, yeah, this is important, but it's not game over.
Right, I'm actually become over the past year or so, I've really become sensitive to the game changer, must read, bodies hanging from the trees kind of headlines, and
Collapse.
either changing them or eliminating those words completely, because it's not. 9 out of 10 times it's not. But I want to ask you, and this leads me into something that you've talked about recently, that it's been all over everywhere. And one of those editor's notes that you were talking about, I started putting on these articles because it was getting to the point of just absolute saturation, and that's the yield curve inversion.
Right.
And you would think that, once again, the sky is falling, Chicken Little, when in fact my editor's note has been that, well, the plunge protection team, the president's working group on markets, they're just going to go in and fiddle with the numbers and print some money and hand it out and say, here you go straighten this thing out. And, 10 business days later, everything starts to smooth out and revert back to what the central planners want. And what is your take on this yield curve inversion?
Game changer. Right.
Game
Okay.
changer, exactly.
So here's the problem I have with the yield curve inversion analysis. Someone first noticed this in the late 80s, that when the yield curve inverts, and for our listeners, that's when the short-term yield pays more than the longer-term yield. And they did an analysis and they saw that 42 out of the last 43 recessions, something like that. I don't remember, it was 19 out of 18, 18 out of 19. That was inverted, 19 out of 18. Would be would pre excuse me, would presage a recession. Now, they said it would presage a recession most of the time, nearly all the time, between 6 and 24 months. Now, the reason I have a problem with that is you're always either heading towards a recession or coming out of recession. And a recession is always on the horizon within 6 or 24 months, especially in the old days before we had greater manipulation over data and the markets. So we have not had a recession for the last 9 or 10 years, which is kind of silly because we know they redid how they calculate the GDP. We know that the stock market has risen threefold in the last 10 years, and the GDP has only gone up, even the way they calculate it, 25%. So things are different. But the main point I have with the yield curve inversion presaging a recession and therefore the stock market going down is your point that it is different. They've learned how to keep the stock market up for 9 years, even though the economy is not doing well. They've learned how to boost earnings. By keeping the interest rates down. Companies have learned how to boost the stock prices by doing buybacks. Wall Street pumps these companies like Tesla that have no earnings, the FANGs. They manage to keep them higher. And the other is just general rationale is you're always going to have a recession. Unless they manipulate the GDP data and the markets so that you don't have one. But a recession, you're either coming out of one or going into one. And when the yield curve inverts, whenever it does, you're going to have a recession at some point anyway. You're going to say, see, it was because the yield curve reverted 22 months ago. The other thing today that is different is the yields on the short and long-term bonds are much more compressed. So it's more likely they're going to be inverted. When you have interest rates at 8-10%, the shorter term yield isn't going to be 8%, and then the long term yield 10%. It's going to be closer to 2. You're going to have much lower. You're going to have a much broader range. So again, this was a story that came out, and everyone picked up on it. And I did the same thing, though. I gave my analysis similar to what I just gave you, but my headline was "Head to the Bunkers, Yield Curve Inverted." Yes. So I say, come for the headline, stay for the analysis.
Yeah, and it was. I thought that was a very creative headline, and it was kind of a hat tip to the must read,
Yeah.
game changer nonsense, just constant that we were just talking about. And it was, yeah, I found that to be quite hilarious. Just wanted to thank everybody for being here and wanted to let you know that there's a lot more to this conversation coming up, and I'll be releasing that on Thursday, December the 20th. And I hope that you stick around for it because it is completely different, but just as compelling. So thank you all very much for being here and look forward to seeing you in the funny papers.